This week, High Performance looks back at one of the most notorious rock gigs in Welsh history. 25 years ago, on December the 14th, 1976, four skinny lads, known collectively as the Sex Pistols, descended on Caerphilly. Well, ordinarily, that wouldn't have been a problem. They'd played at Newport earlier in the year without anyone batting an eyelid. However, after using abusive language during a live television interview, the Sex Pistols became the essence of punk rock. They were banned by many British cities, and wherever their Anarchy in the UK tour bus went, it was pursued by the press. And that tour bus was headed for Caerphilly.
I think it's degrading and disgusting for our children to hear and see such things.
I just can't believe how people felt so threatened by the Sex Pistols. But I can believe it, that a lot of people really think.
I had a number of phone calls, and I'm quite sure one of them was from Johnny Rotten, and he said, if you don't stop this protest and stop getting at us, we'll get at you.
It was like a sort of a clarion call for all of the kind of all the misfits throughout South Wales to get together in one place.
It was no accident that the Sex Pistols tour came to South Wales. By 1976, a network of Welsh teenagers had already begun to experiment with punk ideas, ahead of their contemporaries in other parts of the country. Like the Sex Pistols, they weren't always popular.
Back in Wales then, and I mean where I'm from is from Newbridge, and it was effeminate to wear deodorant, so the boys in the valley having bright orange hair, it was a lot for them to take. No wonder I was known as sort of the village freak.
It was a movement of anarchy, but it was personal anarchy. Well, later the punk thing was perceived as some organised political movement, but, it's a fallacy or even a complete misnomer to believe that any 16 or 17-year-old is actually that concerned about politics. They're too busy trying to pull and have a good time, I think, and dress up.
There was some pretty serious beatings went on for just the odd T-shirt, the odd sort of slash and paint splash and chains and leather chokers and makeup, and you really had to watch out. My personal experience was to be dragged into a car park by some people who had just come out of a Labour club and to be beaten out, have my teeth removed from my skull.
Merthyr boys used to dress more or less like a 50s style. Smart suits, peg trousers, leather jackets, whatever. But a few of the Cardiff lads are a bit more bizarre and like dressing up in women's clothes and stuff like that.
You've heard of the Bermuda Triangle, but we had a punk triangle in South Wales, and it concerned Merthyr, Bridgend and Newport, with Cardiff on a bottom middle. We were interconnected. You'd meet in clubs. You'd use the milk trains, the postal trains, to get back late. One of the things we used to do was go into the photo booths at the railway stations. We spent a few coppers and got strips of photographs of ourselves. It was a bit tricky to get your trousers in, but if you stood on the circular seat, you could usually manage it. And we got a record of our hair colour and our jewellery and our outfits. And, for many people, it's the beginning of their fashion careers.
Most of the reason for creating outfits and going out was one of our means for grabbing people's attentions and provoking reaction. I remember one instance, I was coming around a corner and I was in a white bondage suit with a full Union Jack flag, which had been stained with blood. And my hair was about 2 feet and back combed, and I bumped right into a whole party of school children. They just all turned around and started screaming.
Mark Taylor was the local Nazi. You could turn up in jack boots and a swastika.
We thought we looked beautiful, so...
I mean, I thought we looked okay, the Merthyr boys, but I suppose we were sitting in a pub in Cardiff and Dr. Goebbels walks in, You know, he tends to take you aback a bit.
There was no real traditional blueprint for punk as it later became the Sid Vicious kind of cardboard cutout. You had girls in pedal pushers and little sort of martini heels. There was no rules then, so people dressed up in all kinds of things. In the beginning, there was only like, say, maximum 200 people that were dressing like this. And so, you know, but at least 30 of them came from Wales.
One of the first gigs we did in Wales was at the Stowaway in Newport. And again, we were amazed by Wales because not only did we later find they had the most vociferous and angry bunch of Bible-bashing evangelists in the country, they also had the most extraordinary bunch of looking early punks.
They were actually taken aback because after the show, their conversation to us was, you know, how come you're sort of like so clued up on us and like the way that you're dressed? They were really taken aback by, you know, the fact that we had so much knowledge and that we were as outrageously dressed as them.
You might find a 60s PVC dress that was too small for you, and so you hack off the bottom and bingo, you've got a black PVC t-shirt with a zip down the front. That's what I liked the most about it. It was self-expression.
We went up to this club called Shagarama's, and we were all there in our leather clothes, and I'm trying to pick this girl up, and she says, she says, listen, I'm not having it. Can you stop this Welsh accent? You're not Welsh. I says, well, I'm from Merthyr Tydfil. She says, stop putting it on. You're from bloody Camberwell. And they would not have it that we were Welsh.
There was no attempt with the Welsh contingent to make themselves look attractive in a conventional sense. They went all out to be completely and utterly outrageous and depraved looking.
They couldn't really play, but there was so much energy there. There was so much sort of excitement, and seeing them live, nothing like that had happened before. And it was, I think it sort of gave the teenagers an outlook which made them think that they could also be in a band.
The Sex Pistols were just trolling around the country being a sort of normal rock band, and then they got a deal with EMI, and EMI managed to get them on the Today programme with Bill Grundy interviewing them because Queen had pulled out. And of course the Grundy interview changed everything because they swore on the TV. It was prime time television, 6 o'clock, and the day after the interview the whole fiasco hit the front pages of every national newspaper.
When my father saw the interview, he was totally appalled. He called us all spawn of Satan and destroyed my newspaper and poster collection that I was keeping about different people on the scene. And he was totally intolerant of it.
I think most of these groups would be vastly improved by sudden death. The worst currently are the Sex Pistols. They are the antithesis of humankind. The whole world would be vastly improved by their total and utter non-existence.
It was the Bill Grundy thing and the resulting sort of furore that actually put them into the nation's consciousness, shall we say. That the fact that they were on every newspaper, and when they were lambasted as horrible thugs, they thought it was the coming of the Antichrist and all that. And of course, it was just a band.
We weren't allowed to play anywhere, but it wasn't for want of trying, you know. And we had this thing that we had to turn up to the venues to play, you know. So we would get the money, and there was always an outside chance of doing it. But then a lot of the places wanted us to play or audition in front of the mayor or the head councillor or the burgher of Bognor or what have you, and we flatly refused to do that because we said that was censorship and it was wrong.
A lot of the gigs were cancelled purely because of the fact that so much media attention had been put on how filthy and outrageous these bands were. So a lot of places like the Top Rank, them organisations got, you know, cold feet and decided to cancel. I mean, I think out of the whole tour there was 8 gigs left.
Got stopped in Cardiff. They didn't want to know Top Rank. and we were just getting somewhere else for it. And it was right up to the last minute that they said, yeah, it's going on in Caerphilly.
You know, we did feel like we were on the Flying Dutchman a little bit, or I did anyway. You know, it was doomed to travel the length and breadth of Britain without particularly being able to get off the coach, you know.
Three young mums came storming in. They said, Councillor Ray Davis, what are you talking about the environment for? What about these Sex Pistols? I said, who are the Sex Pistols? They said, well, they're a grotesque, loudmouth, foul-mouth bunch of musicians who down in Newport, they'd done a concert. They were urinating from the stage. They were using bad language, and they're going to have a concert in Caerphilly. So I decided to set up a campaign to stop them coming to Caerphilly.
People were concerned. People were talking about it. People were genuinely frightened by the Sex Pistols.
As the concert approached and other places were refusing to host the Sex Pistols, so the temperature seemed to rise a little bit in the town. A lot of the pubs and the shops and that closed early, if I remember rightly. And certainly there was the mood, there was the rumours going around, there were hundreds of punks coming in from Bristol.
It felt like, I don't know, the Russian Revolution had rolled into town. Something really, really major was happening. It wasn't a blinking pop group, for God's sake.
Punk rock has become almost a battle cry in British society. For many people, it's a bigger threat to our way of life than Russian communism or hyperinflation, and it certainly generates more popular excitement than either of those.
There was a mood of expectation, certainly in the town, of anticipation of all sorts of problems that were going to rise.
The young kids of today, they're frustrated and bored. They're sick of being pushed around, told what to do.
Yes, I wonder if you take his point, Pastor, that people do have a free choice.
No, I don't take that point, because freedom and licentiousness are totally different.
The Sex Pistols, they did have a reputation of being well over the top, and in their the gigs or whatever they did, and you know, we'd heard these things, especially we'd heard that Johnny Rotten, he said he was the Antichrist and things like that, and he was right against what we believed, and we felt that we should make the stand.
Caerphilly didn't quite know what to expect, so took no chances. Pubs and cafes were closed before and after the concert.
But we all thought it was daft, you know, because we were such a pleasant bunch of lads, really, that they could take such umbrage at our presence there, and also be so stupid that they believed carte blanche what they read in the papers.
All the publicity that's hit you, has it helped or hindered?
Both, yeah. A bit of both. It's helped the record, and that's always also hindered us because we can't get gigs.
What sort of response are you getting from audiences now?
Curiosity.
I had a daughter of 16 and a son of 13 and a little girl. And the things that we felt that this Sex Pistols portrayed were not the image that we felt was right for Caerphilly and for our young people, and we felt very strongly.
I got teenage daughters and youngsters. The one went to Rod Stewart, but I wouldn't let him go to see this rubbish.
My father, when I first told him that I was going to go down to the Sex Pistols gig, you know, he sort of demanded that we stayed in, but we opened one of the windows in the bedroom, dropped down from the bedroom window and made our way over to the docks to get changed to go to the gig.
How do you feel about the crowd opposite?
Oh, they're entitled to do what they want. The thing is, they're outside, freezing. We're in here real, right?
On the night, the atmosphere was electric. Everybody wanted to be part and parcel in the Caerphilly campaign. There was no room for any cars whatsoever. The place was totally packed out. And I was pushed in the front over there, right opposite the castle, watching the people coming in.
We hope tonight by this protest to make Wales know, to let the people of this town know that we do protest, and it is by no fault of ours that this thing has come to Caerphilly. We have done everything humanly possible to ban this thing and to stop it.
It was quite funny going in there and seeing, you know, walking past and seeing someone who's far older than your mum shouting at you and, you know, actually hating your guts, and you never even met him before. It was quite funny. You were threatening the livelihood of my children.
If I thought one of mine was in there, I'd go in there and drag them out. Terrible, I think it is. I think it's disgusting. It's lowering the standard of our people in Caerphilly.
They were just going in, trying to hide their faces, I don't think they felt ashamed, but they didn't want anybody to recognise them. And I can imagine what they felt like, because you're with this horde of people, these religious ministers, daring them to go through those through those doors.
We are doing all we can to set an example in leadership and in every other way for clean living, holy living, and pure living.
The clergymen were trying to sort of tell anybody that was going into the gig not to go into the gig because the devil would enter our bodies. They were throwing holy water over everybody when they went in. It was just so bizarre.
And I think I counted about 8 or 9 of the audience going in, and that was about all. And I could see these young people looking at the window from me up above. And of course we set off the carol singing, and we sung our lungs out.
Well, we just thought it was a joke, really. They were saying things like, our children should come out now. It's not too late to be redeemed. The churches will be open till 9:30. And we thought, ooh.
I can remember standing there, and I can remember singing, "Thou art the everlasting Word, the Father's only Son." It was the most wonderful experience of my life.
But it seemed to me about the gig, all the people outside just didn't have the faintest what it was about. They were told by the papers to be outraged, and so they duly were, like good lemmings.
The gig itself was just very low-key. Rotten never minded whether there were like 1 million people watching him or 20. He'd still be exactly the same.
The Sex Pistols came on and they did Anarchy in the UK, and I think Johnny Rotten must have said something to the crowd, "Caerphilly, are you there?" or some obscenity, and somebody shouted from the back some obscenity back, and the group weren't particularly good. Anyway, Johnny Rotten at this point went berserk and came down to the front. I think he may even have came up the aisle shouting, "Who was saying that?" And I remember just sitting there on the side trying to keep my head down to make sure that I didn't make myself conspicuous.
They'd been out on the road for weeks and hadn't been able to play hardly anywhere. So just that experience of being able to get up there and plug their guitars in and sing and play, they had a ball.
We were just these people like going to watch a band. They were just bands on stage playing their music, and it had caused such a furore. It was. I think the whole thing was just. We were just so incredulous of the whole affair, really, that people could have bothered themselves to get up and stand in the freezing cold, sing these hymns to stop us going to watch a band.
On decibel points, the Sex Pistols won. On numbers, it was a victory for the carol singers, way under 100 past the box office.
We sang for about an hour, and when we felt that we had destroyed the concert, we stopped and went away feeling very, very satisfied with ourselves.
After we'd been to the gig and come out, there was a couple of reporters out there, and they ended up interviewing me and my reactions on the gig.
What did you think of the Sex Pistols? What did you think of them?
Brilliant.
What did you like about them?
Everything, the way they dress, the way they sing, everything.
You coming back next time?
Yeah, I just follow them everywhere.
Fine.
A few days later, we sat down to tea in the living room, and it came on the 6 o'clock news, and my father almost choked to death.
Outside, as well as there was the initial front sort of bunch of singers, but behind them there was a whole load of like sort of what we used to call grebos, which are kind of like, makeshift Hells Angels who have kind of Kawasaki 100s instead of Harley Davidsons, and they were there armed with like lumps of wood and all that, and it was really heavy, especially when we left there. Because we'd parked our car and we had to go straight through them. And I remember the 4 of us from Merthyr Tydfil who were present, we just had to run the gauntlet. We must have had a fight for about 20 blokes, but on the run, hitting them, ducking, diving them. And I remember we just got in the car, just as they found out, look, there's those punks, and about 40 of them with bricks and everything descended on our car, and we just got in time to drive off.
And the whole thing that people miss with the punk thing was that you know, we sung No Future, but we thought there was no future unless you did something about it for yourself and took the bull by the horns, you know, and was master of your own destiny. And out of the very early punk movement, practically anybody who was in the crowd went on to do something.
Looking back, I do regret being involved in it. I think myself, really speaking, if young people want to protest, if young people want a different sort of music, it may not be my cup of tea, it may not be other people's cup of tea, but I think they should be allowed to do what they want to do.
What was interesting is that we spoke our minds and people found it outrageous. But then also you start to think, well, why was it splattered all over the papers? What else was going on in the country that they used us as such a kind of a sop, you know, to talk about a pop group, really.
To people who were punks, it was a really important thing, and it really did bring people together, and creatively as well. People started bands, people became artists, and you know, and found out that it was okay to be an outlaw.
It was quite rough old time, you know, really, and I think at the time we all must have been completely and utterly barking mad to do that. If you walked out now in that stuff in Caerphilly, you'd cause such a fuss. 25 years ago, we used to empty supermarkets when we walked past.
Next week on High Performance, we take a look at one of the most long-standing traditions of Christmas, the pantomime. Oh yes, we do. See you then.